The Canterbury Tales. By Geoffrey Chaucer. Summary. In the Canterbury Tales, a group of pilgrims traveling to Canterbury Cathedral compete in a storytelling contest. This overarching plot, or frame, provides a reason for the pilgrims to tell their stories, which reflect the concerns sparked by the social upheavals of late medieval England. The general prologue sets the scene for these societal tensions by introducing a wide variety of pilgrims from across different social classes. When the host suggests the storytelling contest and claims the best storyteller will win a free tavern meal, he incites the plot because this contest both creates a reason for the pilgrims to tell stories and also places the pilgrims in competition with each other. The knight, who speaks first in accordance with his rank, roots his tale firmly in rigid courtly sensibilities. However, the miller insists on going next, disrupting the hierarchy. His bawdy tale that celebrates adultery contrasts sharply with the courtly love of the knight's tale. The reed follows in response to a slight in the miller's tale, emphasizing that social class no longer plays any role in determining the order of the tales. The subsequent tales often respond to each other thematically, creating dialogues about social concerns in the Middle Ages. Several tales depict tensions around the changing roles of women, particularly in regard to marriage. The Wife of Bath's tale ignites this conflict, using courtly romance to subvert courtly norms and arguing for female independence. The Clerk's tale aims to refute the wife's story, asserting that marriage is happiest when the wife is obedient. The Franklin promotes a middle ground. He describes a devoted young couple who share power in their marriage. Other tales in this middle section examine tensions around the role of the church in public life, particularly given the institution's prevalent corruption. The friar tells a story about a corrupt summoner, while the summoner describes a friar who, seeking to cheat parishioners of their money, is himself cheated. Their tales introduce the theme of corrupt church officials abusing their positions for financial gain while also illustrating the rivalries among different religious professions. The repeated hypocrisy demonstrated by most of the higher-ranking clerical characters brings up questions about the sincerity of church officials and their prominent roles in the community. Ultimately, the Canterbury Tales concludes with no real resolution to the multiple conflicts it raises and with no conclusion to the storytelling contest. The final tale is told by the parson, a generous and honest religious leader who, in lieu of a story, preaches repentance to the pilgrims, wanting them to remain in good standing with God. Following the parson's tale, Chaucer includes several paragraphs apologizing if his readers did not like parts of the Canterbury Tales and retracting any sexual or violent content that offended rigid church morality. Because Chaucer maintains a wry tone throughout, it's difficult to tell whether Chaucer means for the parson's tale and his own subsequent retraction to be received sincerely or as a satire of religious performances. Nevertheless, the fact that the Canterbury Tales ends with a call for individual repentance of wrongdoing suggests that there is no collective resolution for the conflicts introduced throughout the tales. Rather, as Chaucer writes his own retraction, so people are individually responsible for navigating the tensions among class, gender, and religion, ultimately determining their own courses of action. Characters. The Pilgrims. Chaucer, the narrator. The narrator makes it quite clear that he is also a character in his book. Although he is called Chaucer, we should be wary of accepting his words and opinions as Chaucer's own. In the general prologue, the narrator presents himself as a gregarious and naive character. Later on, the host accuses him of being silent and sullen. Because the narrator writes down his impressions of the pilgrims from memory, whom he does and does not like, and what he chooses and chooses not to remember about the characters, tells us as much about the narrator's own prejudices as it does about the characters themselves. The Knight. The first pilgrim Chaucer describes in the general prologue, and the teller of the first tale. The knight represents the ideal of a medieval Christian man-at-arms. He has participated in no less than 15 of the great crusades of his era. Brave, experienced, and prudent, the narrator greatly admires him. The wife of Bath. Bath is an English town on the Avon River, not the name of this woman's husband. Though she is a seamstress by occupation, she seems to be a professional wife. She has been married 5 times and had many other affairs in her youth, making her well practiced in the art of love. She presents herself as someone who loves marriage and sex, but, from what we see of her, she also takes pleasure in rich attire, talking, and arguing. She is deaf in one ear and has a gap between her front teeth, which was considered attractive in Chaucer's time. She has traveled on pilgrimages to Jerusalem 3 times and elsewhere in Europe as well. The pardoner. Pardonas granted papal indulgences, reprieves from penance in exchange for charitable donations to the Church. Many pardonas, including this one, collected profits for themselves. In fact, Chaucer's pardoner excels in fraud, carrying a bag full of fake relics. For example, he claims to have the veil of the Virgin Mary. The pardoner has long, greasy, yellow hair and is beardless. These characteristics were associated with shiftiness and gender ambiguity in Chaucer's time. The pardoner also has a gift for singing and preaching whenever he finds himself inside a church. The miller. Stout and brawny, the miller has a wart on his nose and a big mouth, both literally and figuratively. He threatens the host's notion of propriety when he drunkenly insists on telling the second tale. Indeed, the miller seems to enjoy overturning all conventions. He ruins the host's carefully planned storytelling order, he rips doors off hinges, and he tells a tale that is somewhat blasphemous, ridiculing religious clerks, scholarly clerks, carpenters, and women. The prioress. Described as modest and quiet, this prioress, a nun who is head of her convent, aspires to have exquisite taste. Her table manners are dainty, she knows French, though not the French of the court, she dresses well, and she is charitable and compassionate. The monk. Most monks of the Middle Ages lived in monasteries according to the rule of Saint Benedict, which demanded that they devote their lives to work and prayer. This monk cares little for the rule, his devotion is to hunting and eating. He is large, loud, and well clad in hunting boots and furs. The friar. Roaming priests with no ties to a monastery, friars were a great object of criticism in Chaucer's time. Always ready to befriend young women or rich men who might need his services, the friar actively administers the sacraments in his town, especially those of marriage and confession. However, Chaucer's worldly friar has taken to accepting bribes. The host. The leader of the group, the host is large, loud, and merry, although he possesses a quick temper. He mediates among the pilgrims and facilitates the flow of the tales. His title of host may be a pun, suggesting both an innkeeper and the Eucharist, or Holy Host. The parson. The only devout churchman in the company, the parson lives in poverty, but is rich in holy thoughts and deeds. The pastor of a sizable town, he preaches the gospel and makes sure to practice what he preaches. He is everything that the monk, the friar, and the pardoner are not. The squire. The knight's son and apprentice. The squire is curly-haired, youthfully handsome, and loves dancing and courting. The reeve. A reeve was similar to a steward of a manor, and this reeve performs his job shrewdly. His lord never loses so much as a ram to the other employees, and the vassals under his command are kept in line. However, he steals from his master. The clerk. The clerk is a poor student of philosophy. Having spent his money on books and learning rather than on fine clothes, he is threadbare and wan. He speaks little, but when he does, his words are wise and full of moral virtue. The summoner. The summoner brings persons accused of violating church law to ecclesiastical court. This summoner is a lecherous man whose face is scarred by leprosy. He gets drunk frequently, is irritable, and is not particularly qualified for his position. He spouts the few words of Latin he knows in an attempt to sound educated. The man of law. A successful lawyer commissioned by the king. He upholds justice in matters large and small and knows every statute of England's law by heart. The manciple. A manciple was in charge of getting provisions for a college or court. Despite his lack of education, this manciple is smarter than the 30 lawyers he feeds. The merchant. The merchant trades in furs and other cloths, mostly from Flanders. He is part of a powerful and wealthy class in Chaucer's society. The shipman. Brown-skinned from years of sailing, the shipman has seen every bay and river in England, and exotic ports in Spain and Carthage as well. He is a bit of a rascal, known for stealing wine while the ship's captain sleeps. The physician. The physician is one of the best in his profession, for he knows the cause of every malady and can cure most of them. Though the physician keeps himself in perfect physical health, the narrator calls into question the physician's spiritual health. He rarely consults the Bible and has an unhealthy love of financial gain. The franklin. The word franklin means free man. In Chaucer's society, a franklin was neither a vassal serving a lord nor a member of the nobility. This particular franklin is a connoisseur of food and wine, so much so that his table remains laid and ready for food all day. The ploughman. The ploughman is the parson's brother and is equally good-hearted. A member of the peasant class, he pays his tithes to the church and leads a good Christian life. The guildsman. Listed together, the 5 guildsmen appear as a unit. English guilds were a combination of labor unions and social fraternities. Craftsmen of similar occupations joined together to increase their bargaining power and live communally. All 5 guildsmen are clad in the livery of their brotherhood. The cook. The cook works for the guildsman. Chaucer gives little detail about him, although he mentions a crusty sore on the cook's leg. The yeoman. The servant who accompanies the knight and the squire. The narrator mentions that his dress and weapons suggest he may be a forester. The second nun. The second nun is not described in the general prologue, but she tells a saint's life for her tale. The nun's priest. Like the second nun, the nun's priest is not described in the general prologue. His story of Chanticleer, however, is well crafted and suggests that he is a witty, self-effacing preacher. Themes. The pervasiveness of courtly love. The phrase, courtly love, refers to a set of ideas about love that was enormously influential on the literature and culture of the Middle Ages. Beginning with the troubadour poets of southern France in the 11th century, poets throughout Europe promoted the notions that true love only exists outside of marriage, that true love may be idealized and spiritual, and may exist without ever being physically consummated, and that a man becomes the servant of the lady he loves. Together with these basic premises, courtly love encompassed a number of minor motifs. The importance of company. Many of Chaucer's characters end their stories by wishing the rest of the compagnie, or company, well. The night ends with, God save all this fair compagnie, 3108, and the reeve with, God, that sitteth hey in Magestay, /save all this compagnie, Greta, and Smale. 4322 to 4323. Company literally signifies the entire group of people, but Chaucer's deliberate choice of this word over other words for describing masses of people, like the Middle English words for party, mixture, or group, points us to another major theme that runs throughout the Canterbury Tales.